They travel at speeds pushing 200 miles per hour. The very best drivers in the world putting their lives on the line every week. It's time to get the lowdown on this week's contenders, plus a look at the key driver matchups. Right now on Gone Racin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Gone Racing. Jeff Motley alongside Brendan Gaughan here in the Veasan Studios at the South Point Hotel Casino. And Brendan, we're down to 2 races left in the season. It's getting to be that time of year.
You know, the inaugural season of the new car. I got to say, man, this has been a tough year to handicap. Been a great year for the race fan. I think if you really look at the breadth of this season, it's been an exciting year. The mile and a halves. Now, we had a mile and a half last week that maybe wasn't as exciting, but your Las Vegas mile and a half, all the mile and a halves this year were way up on the excitement level compared to years past. And the snoozers have been the short tracks, right? The short tracks have been the ones that were not as good as we're used to seeing. So amazing season. We're almost to the finish line. We got the mile and a half last week to the Martinsville short track this week.
And it's going to be interesting because NASCAR did a lot of so let's go back. The first race at Martinsville this year was a snooze fest. NASCAR did a lot of testing during the season at Martinsville. They're coming back with a completely new tire. They've changed some setups on the cars, trying to hopefully make the race more competitive. I think it's going to really kind of almost make you throw out your notebook from the spring event, and it could make it really, really wide open going into this race.
Well, if they did do all that work, I mean, look, NASCAR has been very proactive in the last couple of years, right? They don't like to sit on their hands and say things are good or bad. So if they do, that's great. There's some guys that hope it's the same old. You know, there's guys like Chase Elliott who've been so great there. There's guys like Denny Hamlin looking from the outside, you know, trying to look in, that have been so great there. So there's guys that hope they didn't change too much.
Well, there's a lot to talk about with Martinsville, but we do need to wrap up last week's race. Homestead Miami Speedway, we had a race where we had a non-current playoff guy win the race, Kyle Larson, who dominated. Kyle Larson has certainly found Homestead to be his liking, whether it's a new car, an old car, or what kind of car. Really, the only other person that he was competing with, it seemed like, was Martin Truex Jr. And, of course, Truex and Larson had a little incident on pit road there late in the race that really kind of cost Truex.
Yeah, by the way,
but Truex, it was his fault.
Truex can sit there and whine and cry.
He didn't blame Larson. He said, hey, it might have been my fault. He goes, I was late to my pits box and the sun was in my eyes.
He wasn't going to make it.
I think the sun, he and Larson both said they couldn't see for the sun. He said where it was setting, I guess, and you've been there.
I've been there.
Apparently it was setting right over turn one.
Amazing.
Like it couldn't be any worse.
It's bad to the bone, but Joe Gibbs was all mad about it. It was funny. He gave, he turned, like, you missed your damn pit road.
Well, one other thing before we get into the odds for Kyle Larson that's made this a little bit interesting now is Larson's car, the 5 car,
That's really confuse everybody right now.
But it is kind of confusing if you really think about it.
Yes,
that team can win the championship, but Larson can't.
Kyle Larson and the 5 team are in the Owners' Championship. So the 4 drivers vying for the championship right now will be Joey Logano, Kyle Larson, and 2 other drivers for the Owners. That's not in the drivers. Kyle Larson is not in. So that's only happened because you had the Kurt Busch situation, and then you had the Bubba Wallace situation.
Well, but because Kurt Busch pulled out, it's the only reason that allowed Ryan Blaney to get into the Owners.
And then Alex Bowman, with his injury, has moved things. So it's all goofy. It's Scooby-Doo right now, and
and we're not going to talk about it anymore, right?
Yeah, casual fans don't care. They want to watch the race. They want to bet some tickets. That's what we're talking about.
Okay. So let's see. Last week, though, Kyle Larson, pretty good odds on a guy like Kyle Larson. Yeah. He was 10-1 to win the race, plus 300 for a top 3. He won Group B at plus 270, plus 500, another good number to be the top Chevy. His only head-to-head was against Ryan Blaney at plus 105. So very strong run for him. And taking a look at last week's top 10, Ross Chastain also was a plus 300 for finishing second. And A.J. Allmendinger, 12-1 for a top 3, got Colleague Racing. I tell you, A.J. Allmendinger, his move up to Cup next year, I know he's not going to be running for Rookie of the Year. He's already done that and everything. But this guy, to me, instantly becomes a contender going into 2023.
Here's the deal. The Dinger has on his biggest streak of top 10s in his Cup career. I think it's up to 4 or 5 in a row. Remember, not all consecutive.
But he's running a lot in a row right now because Noah Gragson was going to be in that, and Noah Gragson is substituting for Alex Bowman. So Allmendinger is getting a lot more seat time than he was expecting.
So, that's a big deal. That looks good for them next year. And Colleague had a great, rookie season. But then you got Austin Dillon with a 4th place. All the weeks, the pit crew. weeks they don't bet their man Brad.
Look, I wasn't allowed to bet him that week. But why didn't you guys bet him? I've been talking him up. Brandon, you needed a long shot. That would have been the perfect one for you.
I did not see the long shot coming from Brad.
His first top 5 as a team owner driver.
That's right. And Wyatt has been he needs to have a talk with his crew, man. Isaiah and the guys downstairs. If you'd had Brad, you would have just absolutely crushed it for the year.
We're already having debates about next year when I can use Brad. That happened today.
And then we see some guys that haven't thrown in the towel. Truex fought back.
Had an awful season.
Now, by the way,
awful season.
To Truex's credit, after that spin on pit road, he was 22nd. And he only had about 20 laps to go. He raced all the way back to 6th place. So he certainly didn't just mail it in. Also, Kevin Harvick was 8th, Kyle Busch 9th, and Daniel Suarez 10th. Didn't mention Denny Hamlin running 7th. Just pretty much an okay outing for Denny Hamlin. But what we don't see up there, I don't see the Bs. I don't see Briscoe. I don't see Byron. I don't see Bell. And I don't see Blaney. And those guys are all in the playoffs.
I don't see Chase Elliott.
I don't see Chase Elliott. So these guys are all like, man, you can't get a top 10 when your season depends on it? I mean, come on, guys.
No, I mean, Chase Elliott, Chase he better show up this next round.
Nobody is locked in other than Joey Logano. Chastain is probably in the next best spot. All right, in our manufacturer props, we mentioned Larson was plus 500. We talked about Brad Keselowski, 20-1. 20-1 to be the top Ford. I think everybody pretty much putting their money on Blaney last week, and Keselowski kind of comes out of nowhere. And then Truex fought all the way back to be the top Toyota, coming in at a plus 330. Now that focuses our attention on where we are with this being the final race before we get to the Final Four at Phoenix on our playoffs. Logano, Chastain, Elliott, and Byron are our top 4 right now. We know Logano's locked in, so we don't even need to talk about Joey. Denny Hamlin, 5 points back of the cutoff there with William Byron. And then you got to go a long way back to Ryan Blaney, who's 18 points out, and then it's a real drop-off to Christopher Bell and Chase Briscoe, who basically have to have another walk-off this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, you got 2 guys for sure that are in walk-off territory, and that's Briscoe and Bell. Blaney, I got to put – yes, the points say that it's not a walk-off, but – I think he needs to get a lot of stage points and be up there all day. And Blaney is good here.
And stage points are going to be important for any of these drivers that is not named Joey Logano.
And Denny just, he needs to have that race. Byron and Chase Elliott are not safe at all. So the Hendrick cars, they are not safe. They're in right now, but they are not in any safe territory.
Well, if you think if Blaney were to come in there, and let's say Blaney ran second in both stages and Chase Elliott doesn't get any stage points, he's within 5 of Chase Elliott in 3rd place, just like that, without even getting into the final stage of the race.
Well, and look who's always been great here. The guys that are good here are guys that Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, these are guys that have been amazing at this racetrack, and they're on the outside looking in right now. So it bodes well for them as long as that holds true with this new car.
Well, I agree with you. And I don't think there's really, look, if you're Bell and Briscoe, you pretty much know for sure what you got to do. I agree with you. Blaney's got to be feeling like he's got to win. Blaney has a chance to point his way in. Granted, it's going to take some things to happen. But at Martinsville, as you know, 500 laps around there, you can lose your brakes. A lot of weird stuff can happen.
Well, remember who won this race in the spring? Who dominated this race in the spring?
Can't even remember who won in the spring.
William Byron. 212 laps led, and then Chase Elliott, the other 185 laps. Hendrick dominated this race.
Well, and Elliott's had some really good runs at Martinsville. He's done those through the years now. And speaking of Martinsville, maybe we can talk a little bit about our stats coming up this week. And by the way, Martinsville, it's a half-mile track. It is the shortest track we race on all year. Unlike Bristol, which is a half-mile track, it is relatively flat. It's basically like 2 long straightaways and 2 skinny turns. It's like they call them 2 drag strips.
Yep, 2 drag strips with a turnaround.
You're right.
The paperclip, it's one smaller than another, and it's a difficult place to race, man. It's so much fun. And, of course, Mike Smith, Clay Campbell. I love you guys. And
Mike's not even there anymore.
I know, he retired.
Yeah, he retired.
Rudest thing ever.
In fact, he helps us out down at Bristol at our sister track.
Rudest thing ever was when Clay and Mike walked up to me and handed me the brochure for the clock. I will forever be talking about that. My last race ever there, and they said, the closest you're going to come to that clock, here's the brochure. I'm like, you suck. Not cool.
American of Martinsville was the furniture company,
Not cool.
I think, that used to make those.
Not cool.
But they laughed.
Yeah, but come on, that's harsh.
That was kind of harsh. That was kind of harsh.
Does that sound a little harsh?
Yes, that was harsh.
I finished second that day. It was a good run. I'm feeling pretty good. Oh, man, I almost had that win. Clay and Mike been racing there my whole career. man, I miss you guys. And they look and go, hey, we brought you a present. It's the brochure. It's the closest you're ever going to get.
Should have framed it.
Probably threw it away in the trash can.
All right, well, let's take a look at those Martinsville numbers. So our guy with the most wins, Denny Hamlin, has got 5 wins. And in 33 starts here, 16 top 5s and 22 top 10s. I think that's just a phenomenal number that you've made that many starts and half of them have ended in the top 5. Martin Truex Jr. comes in next with 3 wins. Same number of starts, but half as many top 5s as Denny Hamlin. And then Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch each with 2 wins here. William Byron, you mentioned having won here in the spring. Chase Elliott and Joey Logano, the other drivers in the field that have wins here.
What I like looking at, though, is go to the top 10, top 5 to the number of starts. I mean, Brad Keselowski, absolutely phenomenal here. You look at Ryan Blaney. I mean, 6 top 5. If he's running, he's in the top 5.
Exactly. He may not have won here, but 13 starts and 6 top 5s.
And look at William Byron. I mean, these are guys that you have to look at. Now, you go down to the bottom, Chase Briscoe, not many starts here. Christopher Bell, not many starts here. But, it's...
And you say the same thing about Ross Chastain, but Ross Chastain also is by far in the best piece of equipment
that he's ever had.
He's ever taken to Martinsville, with the exception of this past spring.
Yeah, those numbers are way skewed for him, just like we used to have the Matt DiBenedettos and all those. It's a skewed number for him.
Well, and I think that's one of the things we're going to be looking at is I just think this is going to finally be one of those races where the playoff guys are going to come to the top, don't you think?
Listen, the way this year's been going, we're going to say it's going to be the opposite way.
Well, you're kind of right. It's like these guys that you think are out of it have not shown to be out of it. So, all right, we'll be back, start breaking down the odds for Martinsville, back on Gone Racing. Welcome back into Gone Racing. Jeff Motley alongside Brendan Gaughan. We're breaking down this weekend's penultimate event. I know that's one of your favorite words in the English language, penultimate.
It's my man Pete Pistone, who I did the show with forever,
right?
He loves the penultimate.
Penultimate. And this is the penultimate race of the season at Martinsville Speedway, my hometown. Always has a little bit of a affection. In fact, I did the show last week from Martinsville Speedway.
Early.
So I was there a week
I'm at
early.
the wrong track.
It's like the Michael Waltrip commercial.
Track.
I was at the wrong track on the wrong weekend. So good to be back in the studio. But we're talking Martinsville, the Xfinity 500. They've had a lot of different names on that race. When I was a kid growing up, it was called, I believe, the Old Dominion 500.
The Old Dominion.
Because they had the spring race was the Virginia 500 and the fall. Because this is back before you had corporate sponsors on all the races, right?
The Old Dominion 500.
And this is also the track where I invoked a driver's name that blew you away on a
what was
year.
that?
Earl Ross.
Yeah.
Earl Ross.
He's the only Canadian driver ever to win, right?
Canadian driver, absolutely.
The most random stat in the history of
You had to look it up,
NASCAR
and you were shocked that I was right.
I had to
look it up.
I had never even heard of it.
All right, well, Earl Ross won't be winning this week. He won't be racing either. But
in order for me to win the Gone Racing league, I need to bet on him. Well,
I hate to tell you, but I don't even think it's even biologically possible for old Earl to be racing anymore.
Thanks, Joe.
Anyway, we move on. So our favorite to win the race, and actually I think these are pretty good odds for these guys to win here. Chase Elliott is our favorite at plus 650. Denny Hamlin is plus 700. Ryan Blaney, William Byron, both at plus 800. Joey Logano plus 900. Martin Truex Jr. 10-1. Bell, Larson, Chastain all at 12-1. Harvick and Kyle Busch at 15-1. Tyler Reddick 25. Chase Briscoe, AJ Allmendinger, Brad Keselowski 30-1. Bubba Wallace making his return after his 1-week suspension, along with Chris Buescher, Eric Almirola, and Austin Dillon, all at 40-1. Daniel Suarez checks in at 50-1. Pretty good numbers on these guys.
Listen, Brad Keselowski, we talked about. I mean, if you say that the tide is rising over there at RFK, they've definitely run better the last 4 or 5 races, and we just gave you the stats on him. Hey, is that something you want to look at with Brad Keselowski at 30-1? How about the Dinger? Do you remember when we used to talk about when Dinger was at Penske? He had a couple really good runs at Martinsville because we always called it more like a road course. Big braking, lot of manager breaks, all that stuff. Can the Dinger 30-1? I mean, that's That may be the way. Hey, that may be the way I get back in it. Come on, Dinger.
Well, you got a couple of guys that are both going into this with some confidence off of last week. While we do know the tracks, like you said, are completely different, I think when you look at Allmendinger's track record, like you said, on some of these type racetracks, and look, AJ's running well everywhere. I mean, it's not just road courses for AJ anymore. He is a bona fide, top-notch NASCAR driver now. It doesn't matter if they're turning left and right.
No, he's definitely proven that. I mean, he has been absolutely wonderful in that. But, when you look at this season, I go to the last, let's say forget Martinsville. Let's just talk about the short tracks, right? Anything less than 3/4 of a mile. You got Bristol, you got Richmond, and you got Martinsville. Those are the only three. Forget the dirt race. I'm not counting that. If you talk about, Richmond and Bristol, the number one guy right now is William Byron. And William Byron is sitting on the board at plus 800. That's a good number for the guy that dominated this race, is looking to keep his way. This race, much more difficult than the spring race. He's the guy that's been best this season on the short tracks.
And you know what's interesting about William Byron? So, and if we were to go back and pull the tapes, early in the season, you and I both were saying, hey, Byron is the guy who could sneak into this championship deal because he was a guy who's ready to break through. And then we went through this lull in the middle of the season where it just seemed like they were just out to lunch. Just we'd forgotten all about William Byron.
Nope.
And now we're sitting here where William Byron, he's in the top 4 right now, going to the track that he's the only one to win at in the new car. The old William Byron thing might be coming back around the way it did at the start of the season.
That one, another guy that needs the walk-off home run, Christopher Bell, is 12-1. He was second at Richmond this year, 4th at Bristol this year, and 20th in the Martinsville race earlier this season. But that 20th comes with a little bit of an asterisk. He was 4th and 9th in the stages, got caught up in something, and ended up, with a bad finish. So, C. Bell, 12-1.
And the fact he's already done one walk-off this year certainly means he's got the confidence to do it. So he's not going to be intimidated going in. All right, now our long shots, we mentioned Suarez was 50-1. Noah Gragson subbing again this week for the injured Alex Bowman, along with Austin Cindric, are 50-1. And then we get our triple-digit numbers. Eric Jones, Ty Gibbs, Cole Custer at 100-1. Justin Haley, Michael McDowell, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. all at 250-1. Harrison Burton, 500-1, and a bunch of guys at 1,000-1. Gosh, I just don't think I would ever get shocked if I saw Stenhouse or Haley or Eric Jones or somebody like that end up winning the
Eric
race.
Jones, I would say okay. Haley, he's run pretty well at some times this year. I mean, I wouldn't.
He
be,
seems to sneak up on us, and we know that
we don't
team
talk
is
about
now
him.
capable.
Nobody talks about him. We don't talk about him betting wise. You don't talk about him fantasy wise. You don't talk about him at all during the race. Then all of a sudden, end of the race, you're like, wait, Justin Haley finished 3rd? What? Where? Who? What? I mean, that's that colleague team. That colleague team is pretty darn tough, man. They built a great little foundation there. And next year, watch out. I bet they win a bunch of races next year.
Well, and Haley is one of those guys who has been successful at every step of the way. He was successful in trucks. He was successful in the Xfinity Series, and I think he's now just kind of growing into the Cup seat. So, yeah, definitely a guy to watch for. All right, let's take a look at our top 3s. And this is where the odds kind of plummet, if you will. Chase Elliott and Ryan Blaney are the co-favorites there at plus 200. Denny Hamlin is plus 220. William Byron plus 230. Joey Logano plus 250. Martin Truex Jr. 300. Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, and Ross Chastain at 350. Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch at 400. Tyler Reddick 7. Chase Briscoe, A.J. Allmendinger, and Brad Keselowski at 8. Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher, Eric Almirola, Austin Dillon at 10-1.
Martin Truex Jr., after coming off finally a resurgence last weekend, was really, really strong. Martinsville, the best guy at Martinsville in the last 10 races. Average finish 6.8, 7 top 10s, 8 top 5s, and 3 wins in 10 races. I mean, Martin Truex, he pretty darn strong there. But what I look at is there's 5 guys that all have single-digit average finishes in the last 10 races. So those 5 guys, they are not the guys that are sitting at the top of that board.
Well, they're not, but the whole thing with this board right here is almost every one of these guys here is almost going to get as good, if not better, odds in a top 3 or in a top manufacturer. And here's against the entire field. I'm just not feeling the numbers right now in the top 3s because I just don't think there's much return. And for those of us who really need some walk-offs,
Brad Keselowski, 800. AJ Allmendinger, 800. Oh.
Okay. That's a couple of them. All right, let's look at our longer shots then. We mentioned Daniel Suarez. He is 12-1. So is Gregson and Cindric. Eric Jones, Ty Gibbs, and Custer are 25. Haley, McDowell, Stenhouse at 50. Harrison Burton at 100 to 1.
Yeah, I'm trying to get some numbers on Eric Jones real quick, and I went to Martinsville. Not a lot of stats there for him. Let's go to the last bunch of short tracks. 2 top 10s in 10 races. They've really looked well this year on the mile and a half, right? That's where he won Darlington. That's where he's really really buoyed himself up. Short tracks, 21st at Bristol, 35th at Richmond, 13th at the Spring Martinsville. Not a lot to show for him at the short tracks.
You know, and you talked about that. One thing I think we've noticed this year, there's a lot of these teams we talk about that have engines that have been coming from Childress. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've seen that with the Colleague team, we've seen that with the Trackhouse team, and we've seen that with RCR. And they have all made incredible improvements on the bigger tracks. But I don't think the engine building quite comes into play as much as some of the other engineering things, and it seems like they're probably a little bit behind on those. Although I'd be curious to see what Chastain does this week, because he's certainly a guy who's sitting there poised to try to make the Final Four, and he's the one guy that is still, has a chance that's running one of those engines.
There's a chance.
I'm just saying. So, all right,
come on. Do you like the reference?
Yeah, I
barely even got a chuckle out of Wyatt.
I laughed. I had a little laugh.
Well, I'm just saying he's the only one that's in it who is a Childress driver.
Saying there's a chance.
All right, let's take a look at our driver head-to-heads here real quick. And our don't line guy this week is Chase Elliott. Ryan Blaney's plus 120 to Chase's minus 140. Denny Hamlin a plus 110 to Chase's minus 130. William Byron plus 130 to Chase's minus 150. And Joey Logano plus 130 to Chase's minus 150. And there are some other big numbers on the board, too.
Well, I mean, look, if I wasn't so far in the hole, I really like the William Byron 130 number versus Chase Elliott. I mean, Chase was the first in the spring race, but still William Byron led more laps and was right there. I do like that a lot. I also don't dislike the Kyle Larson at plus 130 also. I know it's against Truex. Truex had one race. Is it a blip on the radar, or is it, tell things to come? It's hard for me to say jump back on the Martin Truex bandwagon with one race, but plus 130 with Kyle Larson, that's a heck of a number there too.
Well, in that one good race, he actually lost to Kyle Larson.
And he's lost to Kyle Larson.
I know he's got that great track record at Martinsville, but I think anytime you get Kyle Larson at plus 130. The other one I like there, you mentioned William Byron early against Chase Elliott, but I also like him at plus 120 against Denny Hamlin, too. I mean, I think that's a pretty good pick.
No, I like both of those. I'm riding back on the William Byron bandwagon after what he did in the fall racer.
Well, it's definitely going to be interesting because we've got bigger numbers than we're used to seeing sometime on the head-to-heads. Okay, we come back. It'll be time to start breaking down our group matchups. It's always mine, Brendan's favorite. Want to rewatch any part of today's show or any past show? Check out the Gone Racing podcast. It's free and available now at vsin.com/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. We give you all the latest news, odds, and everything you need to know to head to the betting counter before each NASCAR Cup Series race. Gone Racing podcast is free and available now at vsin.com/podcast. And while you're there, catch up on all the other VSiN shows as well. Jeff Motley, Brendan Gaughan, back here on Gone Racing. We were just talking about our group matchups now for this weekend's Xfinity 500 at the Paperclip in my hometown of Martinsville, Virginia. Did I say it's my hometown?
Martinsville.
I'm really proud of my little hometown. It's like when they put us on them.
How many hot dogs can you do?
What's that?
How many hot dogs can you do?
You know what's fun? Okay.
How many hot dogs?
So when I was a kid, I was not the biggest hot dog fan. And you know what I would do? I would go to the concession stand at Martinsville, and I would get the hamburgers and have them put the hot dog chili on the hamburgers. And let me tell you, and they would cook the hamburgers in the hot dog chili. That was some good stuff.
Oh, Harley.
How many Harley eat?
Ooh. They used to put the chalk mark. They used to do the hash marks on the beams in the garage. You'd see Harley with like 15 to 20 hash marks. So it was like,
so if anybody screwed up in the pit stop, is that the person who had to ride home with Harley?
Ooh. My man Harley used to put down some.
Do we know Harley's record? Should we have Harley on next week to tell us what his record is?
Tell us what his Martinsville hot dog record. He might have the record too. Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway. Let's get to the groups.
All right. Enough of those pink hot dogs. And they are pink, by the way. Anyway. Okay. You don't like them? Well, okay. See, you and Clay are already at odds. I mean, I don't want to
listen. There's a hot dog right outside this
Those
window.
are good hot dogs too.
Hot dog, go right here, right there.
Yep. All right. Group A, our favorite, Chase Elliott, 240. Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin at plus 270. And the guy that won there in the spring, plus 315.
Listen,
William
I need big
Byron.
numbers. I need big numbers. And I think not only do I need big numbers, but this is a big number that I like. I think he could absolutely win this one again. He is not going to be playing it. Problem is, how safe is he going to play it with that little bit of a cushion? I don't think he can play it real safe because stage points for Blaney, stage points for Denny. He's going to be trying to stay in front of them the whole day, and that's going to be his goal. I think I like William Byron at 315.
Well, and certainly knowing that some guy can walk off and win. I don't think you're playing for fourth. You've always got to be playing for third at the worst, right?
You gotta try to be close enough to those guys, which means he's going to be around them all day.
Well, and I'm a little bit all over the board here. I mean, Chase Elliott plus 240. That's a better odd against three other drivers than he's getting for a top three. So if you're going to bet Chase Elliott,
Take him for that.
I think this is where you bet Chase Elliott at plus 240. I'm not saying you have to bet him. I'm just saying if you're going to bet him, I would do this over the top three. All right, in our Group B, Joey Logano comes in as a favorite at plus 245, Truex plus 265, Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain at plus 290. And let me tell you where I go, I mentioned last week, Logano's want to is for Phoenix, really, and we saw that at Homestead. Truex and Busch haven't quit, but Chastain is the playoff guy here who's got something to lose in this group.
Yeah, but Chastain to me is the guy this week that has the most to lose. He's in probably the most comfortable position of the playoff guys, and he's got a lot of enemies out there that have circled this race and said, oh, I can get back at him this week. I think Ross's whole thing this week is going to be play it safe, finish 7th, 8th, 9th in stages, get to the end, and not poopy the points away and not let anybody get him. If he's smart, that's what he's doing.
So what you're telling me is every time he sees hood pins getting bigger in his rearview mirror, he does the old Matador deal and just ole.
He's going to be thinking about who those hood pins belong to every time somebody comes up underneath him, because there's a lot of guys that I'm sure have circled this race to say they can do the most damage on payback. Hey, what revenge is a dish best served cold.
But the one guy who has had the biggest problems with Chastain cannot afford to damage his own car in this race either. So Denny Hamlin
doesn't take a lot.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you're Denny Hamlin, this is probably not going to be where you're, unless you end up being like 5 laps down or something like that, and you know you're out of it.
What about Kyle Busch though? I mean, Kyle Busch 7th there in the fall, and running with something to prove before he gets out of that Joe Gibbs Racing car, who he's done his whole career with, not his whole, but the bulk of his career with. I think that Kyle Busch at 290, that's a decent number on that. Martin Truex, one great weekend, does not say I'm back on the bandwagon. I look at that and say Kyle Busch right in big circles to me, and it's almost 300.
Yeah, so I think that Martin Truex Jr. love is just based on his
history
there at this racetrack. All right, in Group C, we have Christopher Bell as your favorite at plus 220. Some people think we may have the walk-off coming. Kevin Harvick plus 245, Kyle Larson plus 255, and a big old number plus 400 on Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking Tyler Reddick and you and I close our eyes and say, okay, where do we see Tyler Reddick absolutely just put it on to people? Do you see Martinsville?
No. Of course, I would have said it would have been Homestead last week, and all he did was put it on the backstretch wall.
But he was there. I mean, he was was looking great. He's got one top 10 in his career at Martinsville. When you go short track racing, I got to search way down there to the 17th best point getter in the last 10 short tracks. The 400 is not enticing enough, even though I need those big hitters. I really do like. I think Kyle Larson. He's already in the Owners' Championship. He's good. Seabell is going to swing for the fence. If Seabell swings for the fence and gets it, it's only a plus 220. I think that Kevin Harvick is probably the easiest money in that group, where he's just going to go out there and do what he does, and that's just drive and finish 6th, and hopefully 6th is good enough to win that group.
Here's what's jumping out at me. Let me get this right. Group C, and he's the third favorite,
yeah.
And it's Kyle Larson?
Yeah, and I'm not taking him.
What's that?
And I'm not taking him.
You're not taking him. I will tell you I am.
But you got Kyle Larson in Group C. I mean, and not even as the favorite. It's insane to say I'm not taking him. But
I mean, it's almost like, are they trying to dare you to take him? It really, because it's like, what's the old thing Lee Corso says? He goes, somebody knows something, and I'm going with the somebodies, you know. But I just, to me, I think Kyle Larson plus 255 being in a Group C, really hard to pass up. So I kind of like that one there. All right, looking over at our Group D, and this one is, I think, very, very interesting. Brad Keselowski, Eric Almirola, and Austin Dillon are all plus 265. Bubba Wallace coming back. We mentioned he was out last week with the one race suspension at plus 290. You know, Keselowski's history at Martinsville says, well, you should bet Keselowski. Bubba's got a truck win at Martinsville, and he's got really something to prove this week.
He absolutely has a chip on his shoulder right now. You know, I look at that, by the way, Kyle Larson, 2 top 10s in his history at Martinsville. That doesn't say. But Brad Keselowski, what we've talked about earlier, and take the rising tide theory, right? I mean, he has actually performed very well the last, I'd say, 4, 5, 6 races. They have bet way better than they did early in the season. So I do like that, Brad. And it's a 265. It's not, you know, it's not buried at the bottom. Bubba, he does have his one truck win here at you know, Martinsville, but didn't really run great there in the Cup car ever.
And I have to say this too, and I will put the caveat also on Bubba's truck win. In those times,
I finished second to him. I'm just saying.
In those times, anybody that was driving a Kyle Busch truck, it almost didn't matter where they were racing. They probably were going to be the favorites to win because you were still running trucks back then, and those Kyle Busch trucks, it didn't matter if you were Martinsville, Daytona, or somewhere in between. They were the guys to beat almost every week out there.
He still had to hold the steering wheel. But I just look at the Eric and Austin. They're sitting there at 12th and 14th best point getters at Martinsville in the last 10 races. Not a lot to sneeze about. Bubba is behind that. Brad Keselowski, to me, 265. I got to go with the pit crew on this one. I think I like that 265 number.
I'm with you, too. I mean, I'm playing a little devil's advocate, but I'm with you. I like Keselowski a lot. All right, Group E. Chase Briscoe, Austin Cindric, and Daniel Suarez all plus 270. Chris Buescher plus 275. Not a lot of separation here.
No, and the reason is, for me to split a hair on this one is going to be extremely difficult. None of them have a great, let's say, history here. The best I could give you is maybe, that Chase Briscoe was 9th in the spring race
with a short track background. I mean, Briscoe probably has more of a short track background than the rest of these guys.
of them, but none of them have been super stellar. It's very hard to pick between these guys. 30th best point getter, 31st best point getter, Austin and Chase back to back there. I don't know. I mean, Austin did finish 11th in his only start there. I mean, if I'm going Daniel Suarez, I mean, he's the guy that we don't talk about, and then next thing you know, Daniel Suarez shows up and runs well. He's got 2 top 10s there. Buescher cashes tickets for us, right? I mean, every time we don't talk about Chris, he's going to win. He's the dog. Not a lot of enticement, not a lot of spread there on the money.
Well, every week there's a group where you're like, and to me, this is kind of the whole shrug your shoulders group. It really doesn't do much for me. All right, we'll take a quick look at Group F. We may have to finish this up when we come back from break. But Noah Gragson is our favorite at plus 250. Ty Gibbs and Eric Jones are plus 275. And Cole Custer coming in there at plus 290.
Noah is fading at the end of these races really bad. You saw him have to get out of Homestead and have problems. And if he has problems at Homestead, he's going to have big problems at Martinsville. Eric Jones, most experienced guy that seems to be the strongest of that group. Eric Jones.
I'm kind of with you there. I don't think there's any reason to really go against Eric Jones right here. I mean, he looks like he's the guy that would be the proper one. Okay, we come back. We'll start breaking down our manufacturer props and tell you how we did last week. Welcome back into our final segment of Gone Racing. Jeff Motley alongside Brendan Gaughan talking about this weekend's Xfinity 500 at the half-mile track in central southwestern Virginia, Martinsville Speedway. That's our
central southwest. Did you cover all
central and southwest? It's kind of in the middle.
Is it in the eastern corner of the central southwestern part of the state?
Okay, Magellan.
And what we do know is
I don't know. It's definitely not north.
What we do know is it's Martin Truex Jr. is one of his 5 hometown tracks, right?
Definitely a home track.
Oh,
race.
I think Martin Truex Jr.'s got like 12.
It's definitely a home race for Martin. So
yeah, it's in the eastern time zone. It's Martin Truex Jr.'s hometown track. Maybe we cut him a break on
even Central. I don't know. I mean,
Central time zone. Yeah, and he's won like 3 times in Vegas, so I guess we could be his home track too. All right, we're looking at our manufacturer props now after
we digress.
Getting chastised over here for my geographical knowledge by my co-host. Okay, Chase Elliott, he is the favorite among the Chevrolets at plus 250. William Byron's plus 300. Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain 550. Tyler Reddick 12-1. Allmendinger 15. Austin Dillon 20. Gregson and Suarez 25. Eric Jones 40. Haley, Stenhouse 100. Landon Castle, Ty Dillon 200.
You know, the problem you got is if you want top threes, it's Chase Elliott plus 200 as the top threes, 250 top Chevrolet. Get a little bit better return if you went to the top Chevy. So I'm going to take Chase Elliott there.
And he's plus 270 in his group.
So, I mean, and he's up against, in his group, he's also up against one of the other Chevys. He's up against William Byron. So, this has always been the toughest one. The Chevys strong.
There's so
the Hendrick
many
cars
of them
strong.
in the field.
And Ross, AJ, hell, even AJ Allmendinger at 15-1. I mean, he very well could be that top Chevy. He's been running that strong.
Well, and I think it's interesting that you could get some of the guys that are lower down. I mean, we saw Austin Dillon run fourth last week. We talked about AJ and what AJ's done. And heck, would it surprise anybody to see Eric Jones or Justin Haley or somebody like that manage to get in there? Martinsville is usually a little bit harder to get the upset, but yeah, you never know. 2 words, Earl Ross. Yeah. Brendan hates that.
I don't hate that one. That was just the craziest stat I've ever heard. And you saw it is the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I was there. Gosh, I was like 6 years old. And I remember, like my first race I think I ever went to that I remember going
6 years old. That was when they were using their feet to drive the cars.
Yeah, well, I do think that they just had the little ear flaps on when
the helmet
when they drove. Yep.
No seatbelt.
Yep. Well, yeah, I think they had seatbelts. I think racing invented the seatbelt, by the way. Those guys would slide across those bench seats and say, we got to tie ourselves in. So when they slide across, the seatbelt was invented. Okay, we really digress here. You can tell we've only got one show left in the season, can't you? Okay, our top 4 picks, Ryan Blaney's our favorite at plus 220, Joey Logano plus 260, Kevin Harvick plus 475, Chase Briscoe, Brad Keselowski 12-1. Chris Buescher, 15, along with Eric Almirola. Cindric is 18. Cole Custer, 30. McDowell, 80. Harrison Burton, 130. Gilliland and Yaley and Cody Ware, 250.
Wow, look at the drop-off.
Big drop-off between Harvick and the Briscoe.
Yeah,
And that's a playoff. It's a guy still in the playoff bubble here with Briscoe.
If you're a Brad K believer, Wyatt, please tell me you're betting the Brad K top 4 bet this week. I mean, I'm even tempted at 12-1.
Well, somebody needs to get back in the game. That'd be a good way to do it.
I don't know.
Brendan's struggling over here. He doesn't really know who to pick with any of this stuff right now. Okay. What's our last one? Oh, Toyotas. That's the manufacturer we got left here. Our top Toyotas. No big surprise here that Denny Hamlin comes in as our favorite here at a plus 180. Then Martin Truex Jr. plus 290. Christopher Bell plus 350. Kyle Busch is plus 500. Bubba Wallace 15-1. And Ty Gibbs at 30-1.
I'm still thinking about the last page.
Do we want to go back?
I don't know. I know I gave you my picks earlier, but in this okay, we do switch it back. It's just that Brad Keselowski. I don't know.
It's not going to change.
I know.
No matter what's on
I was
the
looking
screen.
at no, but on the Toyota page, I really did like the Kyle Busch at 500. I mean, look, Seabell needs the walk off. He's going to be pushing for that walk off, right? And that's when do you crack eggs when you're trying to push too hard. Denny Hamlin, I think Denny's the favorite for a reason, but Denny also has been the guy that we've seen him choke in these sorts of situations in the past. So Denny, you're not getting any return. Martin Truex, one race, doesn't make it come back. I like the Kyle Busch at plus 500. It's a good return.
Well, and it's not like they're going to be out there helping each other. First off, Hamlin and Bell are trying to get in, so you can't really help them. Kyle Busch has only got one race left after this with Joe Gibbs Racing. He would like to go out with a win for sure. And I think Truex showed last week the way he blew right by Denny Hamlin on the race that it wasn't going to be any team stuff. He could have easily ridden around behind him. So I'm kind of with you. I don't think that I would look for the teammate thing to come into play, and Kyle Busch has as good a chance as any. All right, let's take a quick look at our championship odds right now. Chase Elliott is the favorite at plus 200. Joey Logano 300. Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain at 450. William Byron at 650, who's currently in the top 4. And then the drop-off is huge. Ryan Blaney 40-1. Christopher Bell 100-1. And Chase Briscoe 200-1.
Listen, I don't care if you believe it or not. Walk outside right now at those numbers. Put $5 on Chase Briscoe and Chase Briscoe after what he did in the spring race. 200 to 1. If he comes away with this not walk-off home run here, you gotta like it, right? And William Byron 650. Next week he's going to be down at 400. So
if he gets in there,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. If he gets in there, it'll be 400 or less. So I do like those two right there, and even Seabell. If you think Seabell can do another walk-off, go put $5 on him.
And I like Blaney because he runs so well at
I do like
Martinsville,
Blaney.
and he
40
could
to
easily
1.
get in here. And you're talking about a guy,
And that's legit. 40 to 1 is legit. He could win this race, and he could go win Phoenix.
and we could
Legit.
take that 0 off the back of that next
Yes.
week if he was to get in there
Yes.
too. So I think that's a pretty good number right there. All right, let's take a look at see how we did last week.
not.
Well, everybody got a winner,
winner.
at least one winner last week. Brendan got a winner with Allmendinger getting him a Group F win. I picked up a couple of wins, but mine were head-to-head, so not a lot won there. Bell over Logano and Elliott over Blaney. And then our pit crew, they also got a couple of wins with Elliott over Blaney and Kyle Larson winning Group B. He had to win the race to get his Group B. So a very good week for the pit crew again, and their lead is now up to 10 full units over me. And
Don't do the math. Don't do the math.
Yep, we won't do your math.
So as we know, we go worst to first, and I, of course, have been right. I started this season in the lead for like the first 4 or 5 weeks. I had like the big positive number.
See, I came in like at the 6th or 7th race, so I can't tell you.
I'm like, this has been crash of epic proportions. All right, I'm going to go. I got to get big wins here. I got to get some numbers here. I got to at least get back to where I'm maybe single digits. I'm taking 3 race winners, and I've changed since I told him to you, Jeff.
Oh, so I got to do some
Chase
scribbling
Elliott
here.
is. I'm going chalk heavy. Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and William Byron for the win. 3 guys, 800, 700, 650. That at least if I get one of those guys and docks a big chunk of that off.
Can I just tell everybody that Brendan picked Blaney before
Yes.
during the break, which guarantees Blaney's going to win the race.
Probably. I'm going to the Group F with Eric Jones at 275. I think that's just that to me is the simplest one of that group, honestly, looking at it. And then I'm going Brad K. Wyatt, if he doesn't do it for me, I'm coming after you.
My evil plot has come into fruition here.
I need the 12 to 1. Brad, I need the 12 to 1. Go beat Blaney. Go beat Harvick. Go be it. Be the ball. No.
That's the last time I take Brendan's picks before he makes his picks.
Yeah,
I did a lot of scribbling over here. Looks
Well, they have scribble too.
looks like one of my English
make
papers
your
when I was in
picks.
high school.
Goodness.
All right. My picks. I'm taking one race winner, too. I don't do that very often, but I'm going to go Denny Hamlin plus 700 as a race winner. And then the rest of mine are all going to be in the groups. I'm taking Chase Elliott to win Group A, Kyle Larson in Group C, Brad Keselowski in Group D, and then Eric Jones in Group F.
All right, so spoiler alert, the pit crew. I did not go with the Brad K pick this week. I'm saving it for the championship round. I'm saving it for
How
the
do you
final.
save? You don't save picks.
I'm only allowed one because he's got a top 10. But we're going to go with William Byron over Chase Elliott plus 130. Denny Hamlin to win Group A at plus 270. Ross Chastain to win Group B at plus 290. Tyler Reddick to win Group C at plus 400. And Noah Gragson to win
They
Group
didn't listen
F.
to our show at all, did
at
they?
No, and he's taking
I know.
Noah
Every time you
Gragson,
guys were
Tyler
saying
Reddick.
something, I'm like, well, this pick's not going to be well received.
Well, listen, and the William Byron, like I said, if I was in the lead like them, I would have taken William Byron at the 130. I would have taken that Martin Truex one I talked about. I'd have taken a couple of those in the head-to-heads because I liked a couple of those numbers in the head-to-heads today. The Kyle Larson over Martin Truex. There's a couple of those I liked, but I do not have the ability to make a comeback here and the luxury of making those bets.
Well, here we go. We got 7 guys for 3 spots this week at Martinsville. It's going to be interesting. By the way, here in Vegas, we got NHRA this weekend, drag racing.
right.
Again, the penultimate event in the NHRA.
Is this the one that Tony's making his debut?
Tony Stewart will be in top alcohol. He will make his first qualifying run on Friday. So, yep, we'll have Tony out there.
What? Leah, look what a woman does to a man. Look what a woman does to a man.
Well, the thing with Tony, he could become like the first guy I think ever could have run the Indy 500, the Daytona 500, and the U.S. Nationals one day.
Kurt Busch, didn't he do it?
Kurt did the Gator Nationals.
Oh, okay.
And that was in a pro stock. I mean, Tony's doing those really big, high-powered cars. So, okay, well, we'll see what
Woman's
happens with
high-powered.
Tony at the drag race this weekend. Okay, that pretty much wraps our show for this week. Looking forward to this weekend's race at Martinsville. And we'll be back next week to break down the Final Four on Gone Racin'.